Welcome to this overview of the eCPA, Employee Cost and Pricing Analyzer. Employees cost small business owners far more than their gross hourly pay. Of course, we all know about payroll taxes and health insurance, but what about workers' comp, vacations, holidays, and other paid time off, non-productive paid time, supervisory or support costs, training, uniforms, vehicles or other work equipment, facilities utilized, bonuses, and lots of other incidentals. What we found after working with company owners who had employees, there was just a lack of labor burden information. For instance, people were asking questions like, what do my people really cost per hour? How much should I charge for labor? My job cost reports are giving me the wrong information because they don't include burdened labor cost. Does it ever make sense to pay overtime? Should I outsource or just hire more people? Well, there was another part of the problem chain that went along with that, and as people tried to get those questions answered, here were some of the traditional approaches that they had tried and that just weren't working very well. For instance, can't we just use industry or rule of thumb averages? Well, the problem is that those just don't apply to your specific company. And could we just do this internally? Can I ask my bookkeeper to pull those numbers together? Well, the problem there is that a lot of people just don't know how to go about putting that information together. And of course, there's the AMT approach. I call that the adding machine tape calculation approach. And of course, assuming that you get all of your costs in on that adding machine tape to start out with, those tapes have a tendency to kind of disappear and everybody's standing there scratching their head going, well, where did those numbers come from? Why don't we call in an expert and have them prepare the numbers for us? Well, first thing is you do need to find an expert who knows how to put together the labor burden calculations for you. And secondly, those experts can be pretty expensive. I know, I'm one of them. I've helped people put these things together, and it can take quite a bit of time, and of course time from an expert ends up being fairly costly. Well, why don't we just use some old data? We ran these numbers a couple years ago, and we'll just continue to use those numbers. The only issue with that is that depending upon the number of employees, the amount of shared costs, changes in the economy, etc., can have a big impact on what your labor burden costs are. So keeping those costs current is really important. The third part of the problem chain was then that the first two led to bad information so that we were seeing some serious financial impacts. For instance, pricing errors. When owners didn't really know what employees were costing them, they were going ahead and undercharging, in many cases, much less than what they should be charging. Also, taking a look at staffing, the number of people on staff, compensation, and benefits weren't being optimized. We also saw lost and wasted time because employees didn't understand how much their time was actually costing the company, and owners underestimated the value of those employees and what time was being lost and how much it was costing. As a result of these kinds of issues, we saw inadequate revenue accompanied by cost overruns, and so we developed an answer to the problem chain. We call it the eCPA, Employee Cost and Pricing Analyzer. So this solution has been designed to create pre-built easy entry forms that most bookkeepers who have access to payroll and employee information, they're going to be able to drop that information in pretty quickly and easily. Also, you're going to see documented, consistent calculations. No more lost adding machine tapes. You'll see cost results for each individual employee and the suggested hourly pricing rates for each employee. You'll also receive averages and various summary reports for different departments or employee levels, and even for direct, indirect, and administrative employees. The eCPA is easy to update so that you know that you're always going to be looking at current numbers, and you can customize it to match your company's specific information needs. Do you use QuickBooks? If so, you can take the results from the eCPA and auto-post your burden out to jobs. And it's an inexpensive, one-time investment. No ongoing annual fees or annual updates. So people say, how does it work? Well, of course, the fun answer is to say it works great. However, if you'd like to check out the following videos, we'll get into just a little more detail for you.